In this lesson, we're going to take a look at position passes, what they are, how we can use them, and other tips and tricks. So let's start with this here. In case some of you guys are not familiar with what a position pass is, a position pass, this is the one from Cinema 4D. I've renamed it World XYZ Environment, but the way Cinema renders them, it's going to say position pass 1, which means it's going to be a world pass. Now, what is a world pass? In order to use position passes, we're going to have to enable 32-bit float in order to get all the data. And that is because, let's move this up so we can see. If we hover over the image with our cursor, we can see that the numbers start getting pretty high, around 14 and 22. So what that means is that this is the exact position in 3D coordinates of this point in space. If we hover over this image and look at our info panel, we're going to see some crazy numbers going on. And what this number, for example, means is this is the exact coordinate in 3D space of this pixel. If we go here, we're going to see also all the different numbers. Like here, this pixel is on the x-axis, on the x-axis, this pixel is going to be plus 17. On the y-axis, which is green, it's going to be on 6, and on the blue is 2. So by rendering this pass in 32-bit float, we're getting the whole information from the scene. Then we have then we have in our red channel the X information, on our green channel the Y information, and finally on our blue channel we have our Z information. There are different types of world passes that can be rendered from a 3D application. This is a world. There are different types of position passes that can be rendered from a 3D application. In the case of Cinema 4D, you can render a world pass that is going to give you the exact coordinate of each point or pixel in 3D space in world coordinates. There's another one called Object XYZ, and it's going to give you, this is going to look a little different, but this is going to give you the exact coordinates relative to the object. And then Cam XYZ, which is relative to the camera. Also, in Maya, you can do the same thing using V-Ray. You have your World XYZ, Object XYZ, and Cam XYZ. The only downside when rendering position passes from Cinema 4D that I found is that these passes are going to come completely aliased. So let's lower this so we can see detail here. It's completely aliased as opposed to, for example, our robot render, which if we lower exposure, we can still see that some elements are being anti-aliased, and this is useful for creating mattes. The anti-alias data is actually good when trying to get raw information out of it, but when you're trying to use this to create mattes and other things, it could become problematic. So in V-Ray from Maya, you can either enable or disable the anti-aliasing on the position passes, but I found out that, as far as I know, in Cinema 4D, you're not allowed. As far as I know, in Cinema 4D, you cannot enable anti-aliasing on the position passes. So let's start working, for example, with the world position here. And then you might have noticed that when I lower the exposure, we're still getting a lot of data in our render, and that is because it's 32 float. So let's start by doing a set matte, actually a shift channels. And let me show you the first use, and let me show you different ways of using And let me show you different ways of using these position passes. Right now we're going to use them to create mats or ramps. So let's start by only using our red channel. So we switch all of our channels to red, and then we use a combination of levels. Now you're going to see that there is a strong line between black and white, but there's a lot of info still there. It looks like there's info here, but there's also a lot of info on the left side, even though it's really black. So for that, what we do is we move our input black towards the left until we get this edge really close to black. And then we do the same thing with our input white, move it to the right. And by doing this on the x-axis, we are actually getting a really nice horizontal mat. This could be used for fog and other things. So this is actually using our x-axis. Let's do the same for our y-axis. So let's reset this, and instead of using the red channel, let's use the green, which is our y-axis. Now another thing to remember is that the y-axis coming from Cinema 4D is going to be inverted. So let's select our green channel and just invert that part. Now let's reset this. Actually, this is creating some weird stuff. Let me just make sure that we're doing this correct. Let's just disable this. Actually, let's do it here, obviously. Yes, let's do it before the shift channels. And let's start moving our input black towards the top and our input white. I'm holding shift, so I'm moving the increments at a really fast speed. And then I have more information here. Then if you look, we're actually creating a height pass that we can use also for fog and other things. The downside is that it's going to be alias, so we're going to have to blur it in order to use it somehow. But if this was coming from Maya using V-Ray, there would not be any problem with the anti-aliasing. Now let's duplicate this and let's work with the blue channel. We don't need the invert there. Let's switch to our blue channel and let's do the same thing. Now we're going to create a depth pass. If we move the input white all the way back, you guys are seeing that we're actually creating a depth pass. And very important to mention that all of these needs to be in 32-bit float. If we switch to 16, we're going to be losing a lot of information, and that is because on 16 we are clipping everything from 0 to 1, but on 32 we're getting all that floating point data, which is going to match with the coordinates from 3D. So now we have a really nice depth pass using our world position pass. Then we have a really nice height pass for fog using also our position pass. And then you can also tweak the gamma here to control the middle point. And then finally, we have a horizontal pass that could also be used for fog and other things using the x-axis on our world pass. So we're going to continue exploring more uses for the position passes in the next lesson. In this lesson, we learn how to use the position passes to extract information from the X, Y, and Z axis for different ramps and custom mats. We also talked about the difference between position passes from Maya using V-Ray and Cinema 4D.